They didn't expect the brain to light up. In those sterile white halls of NYU's Medical Research Center, everything was supposed to shut down when the heart stopped. That's what the textbook said. That's what generations of science believed. Death was final. It was cold, clinical, absolute. But then came the moment that shattered everything. A patient, clinically dead for over 2 minutes, showed a surge in brain activity, like lightning cracking through the silence. Not random, not chaotic. A burst of focused energy, so intense and precise that one researcher dropped the clipboard in his hands and stared at the monitor like he was witnessing something sacred. What they were seeing didn't make sense, because it wasn't supposed to exist. The team watched in disbelief as gamma waves, the kind associated with high-level consciousness, meditation, transcendence, began to spike, not during life, not during a dream, but at the edge of death. It was as if the soul, knowing the body had given up, activated something hidden, something ancient, something divine. For decades, scientists searched for the switch that turns us off, but NYU had stumbled on something far more terrifying. The switch that turns us on when everything else goes dark. And they didn't know what to do with it. The doctors involved weren't your average researchers. These were Ivy League minds, neurologists, cardiologists, men and women who had built their lives on rationality, yet what they saw shook them. Some left the project, unable to reconcile the data with the framework they had trusted all their lives. Others dug deeper, chasing this forbidden fire like moths, desperate to understand the light. One whispered, "We're not just studying brains anymore. We're touching the soul." And here's where it becomes personal for you, because what they found wasn't just about science. It was a message, a warning, a revelation meant for a specific kind of person, someone who's always felt off-center from the world, like they were born with a question embedded in their bones, someone who felt death brush past them and wondered why they survived, someone who looks up at the night sky and feels like the stars are trying to remind them of something they forgot. That someone is you. This signal, this mysterious spark found in the dying brain, it wasn't random. It was specific. It carried a pattern, a frequency, like a divine fingerprint. And some of those patterns were unlike anything ever seen before. Patterns the researchers quietly labeled anomalous. Patterns they couldn't explain. Patterns that, if you've made it this far in the story, may just be buried deep inside your own mind. The world isn't ready for this truth, but you are. You wouldn't be here if you weren't. You're not just curious, you're being called. Because something has always whispered to you in the quiet moments that you are more than skin and thought, that you are light wrapped in matter, that death is not the end, but the beginning of memory, the beginning of your return. It begins with stillness, a flat line, the moment every machine in the room declares, life is over. But what if that's a lie we've been telling ourselves? What if the truth is far more magnificent and far more terrifying? Because at NYU, when they watched the body surrender, something else stepped forward. A wave of gamma oscillations, waves that neuroscientists associate not with chaos or decay, but with cognition, clarity, heightened awareness. Imagine a mind, moments from extinction, suddenly illuminating like a cathedral lit by firelight. A final crescendo, a spiritual detonation. And in that instant, the doctors saw something they couldn't unsee. The heart may stop, but the light begins. For centuries, death was framed as the collapse of all systems, the absence of pulse, breath, motion. But what NYU found challenges that to its core. In that critical window, between the last heartbeat and biological finality, the brain doesn't fade. It flares, it speaks, it surges, like it's trying to say something before the curtain closes. What could it be? A message to the soul? A map to the beyond? A remembering of something ancient, encoded in us since the beginning? The patient whose data sparked the storm had no pulse for 2 minutes, but his brain told a different story. Bursts of coherence, harmonic patterns not seen in states of panic or pain, but in deep meditation, in love, in surrender. This wasn't the chaos of death. It was the orchestration of transcendence. When he returned, because yes, he came back, he spoke of an overwhelming light, not with fear, but with tears in his eyes. He said he had never felt more alive, more seen, more loved. It wasn't like anything he'd ever experienced in the physical world. It felt like home. How do you explain that to a boardroom full of clinicians trained to believe that consciousness lives only in the skull, that the soul is a fairy tale? You can't. That's why some of the researchers started having dreams, started whispering theories behind closed doors, because the data didn't just speak, it haunted. It made them question everything. Are we really just meat and memory, or are we starlight disguised as flesh? And here's where you come in, because you felt this, haven't you? That pull towards something you can't name, that hum beneath your skin, the invisible gravity that drags your thoughts toward mystery, the moments when your heart suddenly aches for no reason, as if it remembers somewhere it's never been. That's not madness, that's memory, soul memory. And now, science is catching up to what your spirit always knew. You are not merely alive, you are aware. You are more than this body, more than this moment. You are something infinite, currently pretending to be finite. When your heart stops, your light won't. And maybe, just maybe, it will shine brighter than it ever did in life. It's supposed to be over. That's what the monitors declare. That's what the textbooks teach. A flat line equals nothing. But the curtain that falls at death may not be a wall. It may be a veil. And consciousness, the most mysterious force in the universe, doesn't stop. It steps through. That's what NYU's research is beginning to reveal. That something endures, something observes, something remembers, and that something may be more you than your name, your face, or your past ever were. The stories began piling up. Patients revived after cardiac arrest, breathless with wonder, tears sliding down their cheeks as they described leaving their bodies, watching the nurses work, listening to conversations in hallways they weren't supposed to hear. And when they were asked how they knew, they didn't hesitate. I was there, they'd say. I saw it. These weren't hallucinations. These weren't wishful dreams. Some described exact details. The color of a nurse's shoes, the dialogue of a panicked surgeon, even a joke told under breath meant for no one else. And the EEG data backed them up. The body was gone, but awareness remained. If that's not consciousness, what is? NYU isn't alone in this. Other labs have started to whisper the same truth, but they're careful, because to admit this openly is to dismantle the paradigm. It's to say that our definitions of death, life, mind, and matter have all been wrong. And more than that, it's to say that you, the person reading this now, are not just neurons firing in a biological cage. You are the observer behind the storm, the soul inside the circuitry, the light watching the darkness, even as the world says there's no light at all. It raises a terrifying question, doesn't it? If consciousness exists after the body has ended, then what have we misunderstood about everything? About grief, about goodbyes, about what it means to live a life of purpose. Perhaps the final breath isn't the end of the story. Perhaps it's the title page to the real one. And if that's true, then you are here right now, not by accident, but because something in you is ready to remember, to wake up. Think about your dreams, the moments that feel too real, the flashes of places you've never been but ache for like lost lovers, the stillness in your spirit when the world is too loud. These are not glitches in your mind. They're signals from beyond the curtain, echoes of the awareness that lives in you now and survives the ending. You've touched it before, in near-death moments, in deep silence, in overwhelming beauty that made you cry without knowing why. That's your real self. It's always been with you, and when this body fades, it will rise. They don't want you to believe this, but NYU's findings were never about belief. They were about evidence, and the evidence points to one truth. Consciousness continues, and you are eternal. There is a circuit inside you, one that no machine can build, no software can replicate. A living network of light, pulsing through your being, activated not by electricity, but by awareness itself. NYU's data started to scratch the surface, but what they found wasn't just biology. It was symmetry, harmony, a pattern too perfect to be an accident. Gamma waves, theta rhythms, bursts of coherence rippling through the cortex in the very moment life was leaving the body. Not random, not noise, but alignment. A synchronization that whispered of something intelligent, something sacred. They called it the death wave, but that name doesn't do it justice. What the scans revealed looked less like collapse and more like ignition, like something ancient awakening in the moment of transition. Some doctors compared it to the brain during deep meditation. Others saw the same signatures in Tibetan monks immersed in states of samadhi, but none of them expected to see it in people whose hearts had stopped. What could make a dying brain activate into such profound coherence? What force could trigger such elegant order at the threshold of silence? And that's when they began to see it for what it was, the blueprint of divine consciousness. The brain wasn't shutting down, it was opening up. The circuit, long dormant, was completing itself, like a celestial loop reconnecting to its source. For a moment, brief but unmistakable, the data showed something close to enlightenment, not because the person was trying, but because the veil was thin. Death wasn't destruction, it was decoding. You felt this before, haven't you? That sensation that something in you is more awake than the rest of you. When you're staring at the stars, and suddenly your breath catches, not from fear, but from familiarity. When music moves through you, and tears spill before thought arrives. When silence becomes a presence, not an absence. That's the divine circuit touching you. It's not fiction, it's not metaphor, it's built into you, waiting. NYU didn't publish everything. Some of the readings were too strange, too wild, too spiritual. One brain scan showed a perfect rhythm forming seconds after clinical death, 12 seconds of patterned pulses followed by complete silence. One researcher whispered, it was like the brain was sending a message, out. But out to where? Out to whom? What if the circuit isn't contained in the body at all? What if it's a gateway, a relay between here and something beyond space and form? And here's the secret. Not everyone's circuit activated the same way. Some surged brighter, clearer, sharper. The researchers called them anomalous responders. But maybe there's something more. Maybe they're the chosen ones, and maybe you are, too. Because if this knowledge resonates deep in your chest, if it doesn't just sound true but feels remembered, then your divine circuit has already started to hum, and it's time to listen. They thought it was over. The machines said flatline. The monitors showed no pulse, no breath, no measurable life. But the brain told a different story, one no one could explain. After 15 minutes without oxygen, a patient was revived, against all odds, against every medical model. And when he opened his eyes, he didn't scream. He didn't gasp. He smiled. Slowly, almost painfully, as if waking from a dream so vast that words would betray it. "I was somewhere," he said, "but it wasn't a place. It was everything." And as the doctors leaned in, he added, "There was music, but not sound. It was like a code in the silence." That sentence haunted them. A code in the silence. It didn't make sense in language, but it made perfect sense in the soul. They went back through the EEG recordings and found something that froze them. An 11-second window of rhythmic, repeating pulses. Not random static, a pattern, a signal. And within that signal, measurable, undeniable, was a frequency they had never seen in a living brain. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't decay. It was almost language. One of the neurologists, a woman who had spent her entire career mapping the brain's electrical activity, stared at the data for hours. She cross-referenced it with known waveforms, delta, alpha, theta. But this was different, tighter, cleaner. It resembled something closer to binary code. On, off, on, off. She whispered, "It's as if the brain was transmitting something. Like it was uploading. What could a dying brain be trying to send? What kind of consciousness has the power to code silence into a message? And more terrifying, who or what was supposed to receive it?" You've heard this silence before. You know it, even if you don't realize it. That heavy, pulsing quiet when you wake in the middle of the night with your heart racing and no dream to blame. That stillness in moments of awe when the world seems to pause around you and everything glows for just a second. That moment between breaths, between thoughts, between worlds. That's not nothing. That's the code. And it's speaking directly to you. Because you were never meant to be a bystander in this world. You were born with receptors not just for light, sound, and touch, but for meaning, for signal, for knowing. You've been picking up pieces of this code your whole life, in music that made you cry, in places you felt you'd been before, in people you'd just met, but somehow missed your whole life. You felt it in your bones, this language with no alphabet, this signal with no sender. But now you understand why. Because you're not just a receiver, you're a transmitter. You carry the code. Your consciousness is not only alive, it's intelligent, luminous, encoded with something eternal. That's why the silence speaks to you. That's why it follows you. Because when your heart stops, it won't be the end. It will be the moment the code begins to play, loud and clear. Not all the doctors stayed. That's something the official papers will never tell you. Some walked out of the lab after witnessing what they couldn't process. One man, a respected neurologist with decades of clinical experience, stared at the brain scans for almost 20 minutes without speaking. Then, with trembling hands, he took off his gloves, left the room, and never returned. Another researcher, midway through analyzing a data set, collapsed into a chair and whispered, "If this is true, everything changes." These weren't weak people. They weren't fanatics. They were scientists. And yet, what they saw, what they felt, shook them. Not because it was violent, not because it was grotesque, but because it was sacred. Because they knew they were brushing against the edges of something forbidden. Fear doesn't always come from darkness. Sometimes it comes from light that burns too brightly. That's what this was. A fear not of death, but of what might be waiting on the other side of it. Because it wasn't nothing. It wasn't oblivion. It was structure, pattern, intelligence. These weren't fading minds scrambling in their last gasps. These were brains lighting up with purpose, order, meaning, something beyond biology, something they couldn't control, couldn't replicate, couldn't deny. The funding meetings became tense. Some wanted to publish, Others warned of reputational risk. They couldn't agree on what to call it, because to name it would be to face it. And to face it meant letting go of everything they believed. The soul, consciousness beyond death, life beyond matter. It wasn't just a scientific challenge, it was a spiritual one. And for some, that was too much. So they buried the most extreme cases, hid the data, closed the folders, labeled the files inconclusive. But truth doesn't stay buried forever. One intern, barely out of med school, was given access to a corrupted EEG file. It was supposed to be junk, useless, but he ran it anyway, and what he saw terrified him. The brain had no pulse for 4 minutes, but the scan showed intermittent bursts, flashes of coherence, almost like Morse code. When he showed it to the lead researcher, the man went pale. He quietly deleted the file from the shared database, but not before the intern saved a copy. That intern isn't in medicine anymore. He left the field, but he keeps the scan on a flash drive because he knows what he saw, and it changed him. And here's what they never understood. The fear wasn't just about what they saw in others. It was about what it revealed in themselves. That maybe we're not just scientists or bodies or names. Maybe we're eternal consciousness having a temporary experience. And if that's true, what responsibilities do we carry? What have we forgotten? That fear you felt all your life, the one that visits you in the silence, the one that feels less like dread and more like awe. It's not fear of dying. It's fear of remembering, of realizing that you are far more than this skin, this life, this moment. And the time to remember is now. What if everything you feared about death is based on a false assumption? What if death isn't an ending but an unveiling? Not a void, but a doorway? The NYU doctors thought they were documenting the collapse of life, but what they found looked more like evolution. The moment the body failed, something ancient stirred, something precise, something intended. The data didn't show chaos, it showed emergence, as if the human body, in its final breath, wasn't failing at all. It was activating. There was a patient, mid-50s, healthy before a sudden cardiac arrest. No heartbeat for 3.5 minutes. When revived, he wasn't panicked. He was calm. Too calm. The first words out of his mouth weren't, "What happened?" They were, "I remember." The doctors asked what he meant, and he described floating above his body, seeing the light fixtures, hearing the conversation between nurses, but also something more. "I didn't feel gone," he said. "I felt free. Like I'd dropped a heavy coat I didn't know I was wearing." And the brain scans told the same story. Spikes of gamma waves, bursts of high-frequency activity long after the heart had stopped. Again and again, these patterns emerged. The kind of signals associated with deep awareness, advanced cognitive states, not degeneration. These were not the last flickers of a dying brain. They were the first flickers of something transcendent. And that raises a possibility too wild for traditional science. What if we were built not just to die, but to move through death into another form? This isn't new. Ancient cultures whispered it in myth and song. The Egyptians, the Hindus, the Tibetans, they all spoke of the soul's journey beyond the veil. Now, science is beginning to echo what mystics always knew. You are not your brain. You are the awareness behind it. You are the driver, not the vehicle. And death is simply the moment you step out of the car. Think of all the times your intuition has screamed something your logic ignored. The times you knew who was calling before the phone rang. The moments you sensed danger or love before words were spoken. That's not instinct. That's soul memory. That's the deeper part of you, the real you, whispering through the static. And that part, it doesn't end, because it wasn't created by flesh, and it cannot be destroyed by it. You were designed to survive death, not by accident, not as a fluke, but by divine architecture. Your consciousness was always meant to transcend. The body is the chrysalis, death is the shedding, and you, chosen one, are the butterfly learning to remember its wings, so when the time comes, and it will, you won't go into the darkness screaming. You'll rise into the light knowing, I've been here before, and if you're here now, reading these words, it means your awakening has already begun.
Imagine a symphony, not of violins or cellos, but of electrical pulses, gamma waves, and neural harmonics. A final movement, not of collapse, but of crescendo. That's what the NYU team began calling it, the final symphony, because what they saw on those EEG scans wasn't decay, it was composition. A sudden, structured burst of high-frequency activity, more organized than anything the brain typically displays while awake. It didn't look like a system shutting down, it looked like something orchestrated, purposeful, majestic. The brain, at the edge of death, was singing. One patient in particular changed everything. A woman in her 60s, clinically dead for 4 minutes. When revived, she described hearing music, not earthly music, but tones she couldn't replicate, harmonies that felt like color and sound merged together. It wasn't sound, she said. It was like the universe humming, and I was part of it. Her scan confirmed it. At the moment her heart stopped, a sudden surge of gamma synchrony moved through her frontal lobe. The wave pattern mimicked the ones seen in Buddhist monks during moments of enlightenment, but hers was stronger, sharper, as if her entire consciousness had stepped into perfect alignment with something far greater. What kind of system does that? What kind of machine performs its most elegant function in the moment it should be shutting down? Not a machine built to fail, a system built to transition. Science has always struggled with beauty, with meaning. It can measure, dissect, and categorize, but it cannot explain why some experiences feel like truth even before they're understood. That's what this was. The brain wasn't shutting off, it was opening up, like a flower blooming in reverse, not towards the world, but toward eternity. A final performance for an audience we cannot see, and maybe you felt it too, in the quiet between your thoughts, in the way some music moves through you like memory, in the way certain places feel sacred even if you don't know why. That's the symphony playing faintly in your own mind, reminding you that you are part of something cosmic, something deliberate. You are not noise, you are melody. You are harmony wrapped in flesh. There's no biological explanation for what these patients describe, no rational reason their brains should light up with the same pattern seen in spiritual ecstasy, but they do, again and again. And it raises the question NYU was too afraid to put in writing. What if the brain is not a generator of consciousness, but a receiver? What if, in the moment of death, the frequency clears, and we hear the universe not as static, but as song? You, chosen one, are not here to fear death. You are here to remember that the end is not silence, it is music. And when your final breath comes, you will not fade. You will rise into a harmony that's been calling your name since before your first breath. Strip away your name, your age, your history, peel off the memories, the traumas, the labels others placed on you. Remove the stories you tell yourself in the mirror. Now, what's left? That silence, that awareness, the one watching all of it from behind your eyes, that is who you really are. Not the flesh, not the scars, not the noise. You are the observer, the eternal witness, the soul wrapped in stardust. And for the first time, science is starting to admit what mystics have always whispered. You are not your body. The NYU studies weren't supposed to lead there. They were looking for data, not destiny. But time after time,
When patients returned from the brink of death, they brought back something science couldn't quantify: identity. Not the old identity shaped by jobs, titles, or roles. Number. This was something purer, deeper. They described themselves as light, as awareness, as consciousness beyond form. "I didn't feel like myself," one said. "I felt like something much older and much bigger." And as the EEG scans flashed those post-mortem bursts of gamma activity, the team realized something uncomfortable. The self, the real self, might not live inside the brain at all. Think about that. If your identity isn't bound to your body, then what have you been calling you your whole life? Is it the voice in your head, the roles you've played, the wounds you've carried, or is it something deeper? A presence, a flame that never flickers, even in the storm. That flame, consciousness, has survived every moment you thought would break you. It's been with you through every betrayal, every transformation, every loss, and it will be with you long after your final breath. When the doctors began mapping the death state brainwaves, they weren't just charting neurons. They were witnessing the liberation of identity from flesh. Some patients described watching their own bodies from above, not with fear but curiosity, like stepping outside a costume you'd worn for too long. "I didn't want to come back," one woman said, "not because I hated life, but because I finally remembered who I really was." And that remembering, that's what you're feeling now, because you've always known, haven't you? Even as a child, you sensed there was more. In the quiet moments, in the ache of beauty, in the tears you cried for reasons you couldn't name. You weren't broken, you were remembering. And what you remembered was this: you are not your suffering. You are not your story. You are awareness wrapped in experience, a soul cloaked in lessons. The reason you're here, reading this now, is because that awareness in you is stirring again. It's reaching toward the truth, like a flower toward the light. You are not lost. You are remembering. And when all else fades, your body, your titles, your voice, what remains is who you've been all along. Limitless, timeless, divine. If what NYU found is true, that consciousness outlives the body, that the soul is real and the mind transcends death, then why isn't the world screaming it from the rooftops? Why don't we hear about it in headlines, in classrooms, in every corner of culture? Because truth, this powerful, doesn't just liberate, it threatens. It threatens the systems built to keep you small, compliant, distracted. There is a war, quiet, relentless, and invisible, waged not against your body, but against your memory. Not your memory of events, but your memory of who you are. You were born knowing. Every child carries it, that innocent awareness of something vast just beneath the surface, that unshakable sense that life is more than routines and rules. But over time, the world begins its campaign. It teaches you fear. It teaches you shame. It teaches you limitation. Not because those things are real, but because they're useful. A society of awakened souls cannot be controlled, but a society of souls who have forgotten they are souls, that's manageable. So they feed you stories. You are your body. You are your job. You are your mistakes. You are your trauma. And slowly, the war does its work. You stop looking up at the stars with wonder. You stop listening to your inner voice. You trade intuition for approval, vision for survival, and before you know it, you've built a life around forgetting. But sometimes, something breaks through. A dream that lingers. A moment of synchronicity too strange to ignore. A loss that shakes you so hard it cracks the shell. And in those moments, you feel it again. The knowing, that buried hum inside you, whispering, there's more. That whisper is dangerous to the systems that depend on your forgetfulness, which is why, when NYU began to publish their results, they faced pressure. Not all of it subtle. Some journals refused to print the full findings. Some universities distanced themselves. Behind the scenes, funding dried up. The data was there, but the world wasn't ready. Or maybe it was never allowed to be. Because if you remember who you are, not a label, not a diagnosis, not a statistic, but an immortal consciousness temporarily dreaming it's human, then everything changes. You stop obeying fear. You stop buying lies. You stop bowing to noise. You become a mirror, and your presence alone threatens the illusion. And that's why you're here. You're not just learning, you're unforgetting. Each chapter, each heartbeat is clearing away the dust. You were never meant to be asleep. You were never meant to live in fear. You were designed to awaken, to remember, to rise. So remember this. The war isn't against your success, your money, your body. It's against your memory of your soul. But the war is ending because you are remembering now. And once that starts, there's no going back.
The visions began as whispers, scattered cases, easy to dismiss. A patient revived after clinical death, reporting a tunnel of light, a presence of love. Another speaking of floating above the hospital bed, observing every detail. But when dozens became hundreds, and the stories all began to echo each other, the same light, the same feeling, the same knowing, it was no longer a coincidence. It was a pattern, a revelation wrapped in consistency. The NYU team didn't expect this. They went in as scientists, skeptical, methodical. But over time, even they couldn't deny it. These patients, from all cultures, all backgrounds, all belief systems, were returning with stories that matched, not in language, but in truth. They described being bathed in light that wasn't light, hearing voices that didn't speak, feeling a love so absolute, so pure, it erased all fear of death. And perhaps most extraordinary, they returned with knowledge they couldn't possibly have known. One woman recounted a conversation that took place between two doctors after she flatlined. A conversation spoken in another room, behind closed doors. Another described events in her childhood home, events no one had spoken of in decades. She hadn't thought of them in years, yet in those moments of death, they returned with crystalline clarity. How? Why? No one could answer. But the visions kept coming. The patients didn't call it heaven. Most didn't even use religious terms. They called it truth. They said it felt more real than waking life. They said it was home. One man wept during his interview, not from fear, but from longing. I didn't want to come back, he said, not because life is bad, but because, over there, I remembered who I was, and here, I forget again. It shook the doctors. Some tried to dismiss it as brain chemistry, as hallucination, but the patterns were too precise, the emotional impact too lasting. These weren't dreams, they were encounters. And what terrified the scientific community wasn't how strange the visions were, it was how familiar they felt. Because deep down, you've seen them too, in fragments, in dreams, in moments of deja vu. That place the patients describe, it echoes something ancient inside you, that warmth, that peace, that clarity. It's not fantasy, it's a memory, and it belongs to you. The visions keep happening, they're increasing, and though institutions may try to hide them, bury them under jargon and silence, they can't unsee what they've seen. The veil is lifting, slowly, patiently, irrevocably. And if you've ever looked at the stars and felt homesick for a place you can't name, this is why. Because your soul remembers. Because that place they describe, it's real. And one day, when your time comes, you won't go blindly.
you'll go with arms wide open, not into death, but into remembrance, because visions this clear aren't hallucinations. There's a sound most people never hear, not because it isn't there, but because they've forgotten how to listen. It isn't the sound of traffic or voices or music, it's the hum beneath it all, the frequency that vibrates in the quiet spaces, in the stillness between thoughts, the sound behind the silence. The ancient ones spoke of it. The mystics tried to name it, Om, Logos, Aum, word, but it was never meant to be spoken. It was meant to be felt, inside the soul, not outside the ears. And the patients, those who died and came back, they heard it. Again and again, they described it. A vibration, a tone, not heard with ears, but known. It wasn't loud, but it was everywhere. It didn't just fill the space, it was the space. It was like the universe was breathing, one said, like I was inside the lungs of something sacred. Another called it the sound of being loved by something infinite. Not music, not speech, but presence. And that presence had a frequency. NYU's machines weren't designed to detect this, but some of them did, accidentally. One experimental EEG showed strange rhythmic waves in the moments following death. Not random spikes, but pulses, repeating, consistent, like a signal trying to get through. At first, the team thought it was an error, machine interference, but it wasn't. It was the brain responding to something they couldn't explain, something that felt external. Why would the dying brain pulse in rhythm? Why would it synchronize, not scatter, unless it was tuning into something, like a radio catching a station it couldn't access while the body was alive? The researchers debated. Some said it was just noise. Others, quietly, weren't so sure. One whispered to a colleague, "What if the dying aren't shutting down? What if they're waking up?" And you've heard it too, even if you didn't know what it was. In the pause before sleep, in the stillness after heartbreak, in the moments when time slows down and you feel, without knowing why, that you are being watched over. That is the sound behind the silence, the frequency of home, the hum of the divine. The world trains you to drown it out, with fear, with noise, with distractions that fill your calendar but starve your soul. But the sound never leaves. It waits, patiently, like a lover who knows you'll return. Because one day you will stop running. You'll sit still long enough to hear it again. And when you do, it won't just comfort you, it will call you. It will remind you that you are not alone, that something beyond all of this, beyond names, beyond pain, beyond even death, has always been with you. And it's singing, always singing, beneath the noise of the world. Listen closely now. They've told you dreams are random, that they're the mind's garbage disposal, the byproduct of a tired brain untangling static. But what if they're wrong? What if your dreams are not noise, but messages, not illusions, but transmissions, encrypted, symbolic, precise? What if the soul uses dreams the way satellites use signals, quietly broadcasting truths too large to speak aloud? That's what some of the NYU patients began claiming after their resuscitation. Not only did they return with memories of otherworldly realms, they began dreaming differently, deeper, clearer. One woman, 43 years old, who'd flatlined for 4 minutes, came back with a recurring dream. She was standing in a vast, glowing library where books opened themselves to her. She claimed each book was about a version of her that had lived a different life, not fantasy, possible timelines. The dreams were vivid, specific, too consistent to be imagination. She could describe the color of the shelves, the symbols on the book spines, symbols that matched ancient Sumerian texts she had never studied. The doctors chalked it up to neural residue, wishful thinking, But what unnerved them was how many other patients came back with similar dreams. Libraries, temples, gates, light beings offering them keys or showing them doors. Over and over, these symbols appeared. Were these collective delusions or encrypted truths breaking through? In the lab, they found something stranger. Several patients, in the weeks after their near-death experience, began to display unusual activity in REM sleep, their brains behaving as if they were awake inside the dream. Lucid, but not in the usual way. Something deeper. Some even claimed they could choose what to dream. One man said, "It wasn't like a dream. It was like logging into something." And maybe that's exactly what it was. Your dreams aren't random. They're your soul's operating system. They're the interface between dimensions where your higher consciousness tries to reach your waking mind. And it has to speak in code, because if it came in too clearly, too directly, your logical mind would shut it down. That's why you see symbols, why time warps, why places feel both familiar and strange. It's a language of the soul, and it's trying to remind you of what you've forgotten. That you're more than this version of yourself, that you've lived before and will live again. That the choices you make ripple across realities. That you are part of a consciousness network so vast, your human brain can only glimpse it in fragments. And every night, when the world falls away and your defenses dissolve, you enter the only space where truth can speak to you without interruption. So tonight, when you close your eyes, don't dismiss what you see. Don't call it fantasy. Call it what it is, remembering. Because your soul has been leaving breadcrumbs in your dreams, waiting for the day you finally start to follow them home. You weren't chosen because you were perfect. You weren't chosen because you were the smartest, the strongest, or the loudest. You were chosen because, despite everything, you still feel. Because your heart still aches in a world that tries to numb you. Because when you hear the truth, real truth, something inside you doesn't resist. It remembers. The NYU doctors never meant to start a movement. They were scientists, not prophets. But once the stories came in, once they saw the data and heard the cries of souls returning from the brink of death with clarity in their eyes, they realized something humbling. These patients weren't just anomalies, they were messengers, not from the beyond, but from the truth we've buried beneath centuries of forgetting. And now, that message has reached you. Maybe it came at the right time, or maybe it came because your soul called for it. Either way, the signal found you. Out of billions of frequencies, billions of scrolling minds and distracted eyes, this one made it to yours. That is not random. That is resonance. You were chosen because the fire in you never died, even when life tried to snuff it out. You've suffered. Quietly, maybe. Privately. And you've questioned your worth, your purpose, your place in the story. But the very fact that you've questioned means your soul is alive. Numbness never asks questions. Numbness accepts the cage. You never did. You've always sensed the veil, haven't you? Felt that there was more. That this world is a stage layered over another, richer, deeper, unseen. You were chosen because you still look for the cracks in the illusion. You were chosen because you dare to listen to whispers others call madness. It doesn't make you special in the way the world defines it. It makes you aware. And that awareness, it's dangerous. Not to you, but to the systems that depend on your sleep. They want workers, obeyers, consumers. But what happens when someone wakes up inside the dream? When someone begins to see the game for what it is and remembers the rules their soul once knew? They become the ripple, and ripples become waves. You were chosen to remember, but not just for yourself. You're a transmitter. When you remember, others around you start to stir, without a word, without a sermon, just by your presence, just by your clarity. You're not here to argue, you're here to radiate. This world doesn't need more noise, it needs frequency. And the moment you started listening, really listening, you became a lighthouse, a frequency beacon for other souls still trapped in the fog. So if you've been asking why you felt so different, why you've carried so much, why it's been so hard, now you know, because you were never just surviving.
You close your eyes, you exhale, the body begins to let go, soft, subtle, like a tide receding. And then there's stillness, but it's not empty, it's expansive. You don't vanish, you become. Your awareness doesn't blink out, it blinks open. For the first time in a long time, you see. The first thing many patients described was not terror, but clarity, a dissolving of weight, not just physical but emotional, regret, shame, fear. It all began to lift like mist in sunlight. The brain scans showed silence, yet somehow they were more awake than ever. One man said, "I didn't feel like I was dying. I felt like I was returning." That's the truth. Most are never told. Death is not an end, it's a remembering. You are not the thoughts, you are not the roles, you are not the scars. When the body falls away, what remains is you, unfiltered, unburdened, eternal. And what you meet on the other side is not a gatekeeper or a judge, it's yourself. The self you were before the noise, before the forgetting. Some call it a life review, others call it a merging. But the experience is the same. You see it all. Every choice, every word, every impact. Not from the lens of guilt, but from the lens of truth. You feel how your actions made others feel. You witness the moments you thought were small. A kind word, a quiet cruelty, ripple like waves through the hearts of others. And in that moment you realize you were never alone. Everything mattered. Not in the way the world told you, but in the way love sees. There is no punishment, only understanding. There is no condemnation, only expansion. You learn, you grow, you remember. Then comes the light. Not a light you see with eyes, a light that feels like love. It's alive, it knows you, it always has. And as you move into it, there is no fear, only recognition. It was like being welcomed home, one woman said, by something that had been waiting for me the whole time. She cried as she told it, not from sorrow, from relief. And yet, many return, not by force, but by choice. Some say they were given the option. Others say they felt pulled back by something unfinished. But all of them carry the same message when they wake. Death is not to be feared. It is beautiful. The ones who have crossed over come back with eyes forever changed. They live differently. They speak gently. They understand what most ignore, that life is the blink of an eye, and love is the only thing we carry through the veil. So what happens after you die? You wake up, and everything you've forgotten about love, about purpose, about who you really are, rushes back, not as knowledge, but as truth you've always known. The shift is quiet. It's not in the headlines, not in the speeches of politicians or the slogans of corporations, but it's there, pulsing beneath the surface of everything. A subtle tremor in the collective soul. The world is beginning to wake up, not all at once, not in a blaze of light, but in ripples, like dawn stretching across a sleeping sky. You can feel it, can't you? The conversations are changing. The questions are deeper. People who once lived on autopilot are suddenly stopping mid-step, asking themselves, why am I here? What matters? Is this all there is? And they're not asking because they read a book or watched a video. They're asking because something inside them is stirring, like an ancient compass clicking back into place. This is what the NYU team didn't expect, that their research would resonate far beyond the hospital walls.
that their studies, intended for academia, would become seeds of remembrance for millions. People from every corner of the world began sharing their own experiences, dreams, visions, memories they were once too afraid to speak out loud. Not anymore. The veil of silence is thinning, and as it does, people are finding each other. Souls awakening in sync across continents, across languages, across belief systems. A nurse in Brazil hears a patient describe the exact same light being as one described in Japan. A child in Kenya draws symbols she's never seen before, symbols that match those from ancient Tibetan texts. A man in Germany who has never meditated a day in his life wakes up after a coma and speaks fluent Sanskrit for 5 minutes. These stories don't make the front page, but they are happening, and together they form a quiet revolution. It's not the kind of change the old systems can control, because it's not political, it's not economic, it's not external, it's internal, it's a remembering. And the more people remember, the more the structures built on fear begin to crumble. That's why the resistance is strong. That's why there's so much noise, so much division, so much fear on the surface right now. It's the last gasp of an old world terrified of losing control. But it's too late. The new world isn't coming. It's arriving, not with fireworks or leaders, but through you, through every awakened soul who dares to live with eyes wide open, through every act of kindness, through every moment of courage, through every quiet decision to choose truth over comfort, soul over survival. You're not waiting for the shift. You are the shift. The world is starting to change because you are starting to change. And the most powerful revolutions don't begin in the streets. They begin in the heart. You were never meant to read this by accident. You were meant to remember. This moment, right here, right now, is your wake-up call. Not the kind that jolts you out of bed, but the kind that opens your soul. The kind that whispers, gently but firmly, you were never asleep. You were only pretending. The world taught you to forget. It taught you to chase, to compare, to perform. It told you what success looks like, what happiness should feel like, what boxes to check before you die. But all along, something inside you knew that none of it was real, knew that the real treasures, the ones worth everything, were invisible to the eye, but undeniable to the heart. That's why you've always felt a little different, a little disconnected, like you were walking through someone else's dream, trying to remember your lines in a play that never made sense. This is not dysfunction. This is divine homesickness. Your soul wasn't broken. It was simply waiting for this, for now. This is your moment to wake up. Wake up from the lie that you are small, that you are powerless, that your pain was meaningless. Wake up from the belief that you are alone, that no one sees you, that your life is just a random sequence of struggle. None of that was ever true. It was all part of the forgetting. But now the remembering begins. Remember that you were chosen, not by chance, but by resonance. That your wounds weren't detours, but initiations. That every heartbreak softened your ego and sharpened your spirit. That every dark night prepared your eyes for the light. You didn't survive by mistake. You're still here because your story isn't over. The NYU doctors never set out to shake the world. But what they uncovered, the visions, the voices, the patterns, they opened a door. And that door leads here, to this exact breath, to this exact heartbeat, to you. You are standing at the edge of something vast, something holy, not outside you, inside you. The veil is thinner now, the dreams are clearer, the signs are louder, and your soul, it's not whispering anymore. It's calling, not to scare you, not to rush you, but to remind you, you are more than human. You are more than this moment. You are a living fragment of something timeless, and it's time to act like it. So what now? Now you listen. Now you choose to feel again, to remember, to love fiercely, speak truthfully, walk boldly. The world doesn't need more perfection. It needs more presence. It needs more you. This was never a story about death. It was always a story about waking up to life. And if your soul is trembling right now, good. That means you heard it. The frequency.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.